A Death in Zion Falls by Christopher L. Cooper. Chapter 1. The clinic opened at 8, but Dr. Evelyn Porter was always there by 7. She liked the silence before the phone started ringing, before the waiting room filled with the familiar sense of damp coats and anxiety, before people needed things from her. The building still smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. It was a scent that usually felt like home. Today, it turned her stomach. She flicked on the lights one by one as she walked down the hallway. Her keys were already back in her purse, right where she always kept them. She paused outside the first exam room and glanced at the schedule taped to the wall. It was full, like always. She'd stopped being surprised by how much this town asked for her. The clinic had started as a shared dream between her and her husband, Thomas. They had begun with 2 exam rooms, borrowed equipment, and more hope than money. The village of Zion Falls had needed a doctor, and back then, Dr. Porter had needed something that felt solid under her feet. She had grown up on the wrong side of the tracks in a neighboring county, the kind of childhood where a doctor was a luxury her parents could not afford. When she finally earned her degree, she did not want a shiny office in the city. She wanted to be the safety net she never had. To Dr. Porter, every patient was not just a chart. They were a debt she was paying back to a world that had finally given her a seat at the table. Over time, the clinic grew in the same messy, beautiful way their family had. First came Claire, then Aaron. The town had settled into relying on Dr. Porter the way a patient settles into trusting a steady hand. Nobody ever said it out loud. They just showed up, day after day, expecting the doors to open and the lights to be on. They always were. By the time the receptionist arrived, Dr. Porter had already reviewed labs, refilled 3 prescriptions, and returned 2 calls. One was for the school nurse regarding a child with asthma. The second was for a man who had missed his appointment but still expected a medical consultation over the phone. "I'll fit him in," Dr. Porter said as she hung up the receiver. Jill, the receptionist, smiled with a mixture of pity and relief. "You always find a way." Dr. Porter smiled back, though she felt a sudden, sharp wave of nausea. She leaned against the desk for a moment, letting it pass. The waiting room filled quickly. A mother with a toddler whose cough was a sharp, dry rasp, as if the child's throat was lined with sandpaper. An older couple holding hands. A man in the corner staring at the floor, his legs shaking with a rhythmic, nervous energy. Dr. Porter moved between the rooms with practiced ease. She listened more than she spoke, asking the questions that people usually spent their lives avoiding. She noticed when a patient's eyes darted away. She knew exactly when someone was lying. Kara Bennett was at the front desk, moving through the morning rush with a grace that Dr. Porter envied. Kara had been helping more often lately, filling the gaps when the clinic ran short. She learned quickly. She remembered names. She asked the right questions before Dr. Porter even had to prompt her. Dr. Porter liked her. It wasn't just because Kara was dating Aaron. It was because she showed up. She stayed late without being asked and checked on patients after, just to be sure they were okay. That morning, Kara handed a clipboard back to Dr. Porter. Her fingers brushed Dr. Porter's hand, and the girl's touch was cool. "They're all set," Kara said, gesturing to the mother and toddler. She was nervous about the nebulizer, so I walked her through it again. Dr. Porter forced a smile. "You didn't have to do all that." "I know," Kara replied, but it helped. There was no pride in her voice, only a simple kindness. Dr. Porter trusted that kind of steadiness. "Thank you," Dr. Porter said. Kara shrugged it off as if it were nothing. "He's doing better, you know, Aaron. He wants you to know that." Dr. Porter felt something soften in her chest, a brief relief from the constant ache of worry. "I hope so," she said gently. "I'll try to reach out to him tonight." Kara nodded once, her expression steady and sincere. "I hope you do." Dr. Porter had seen many people try to love Aaron over the years. Kara was the first who tried to understand him instead. Dr. Thomas Porter arrived just before noon. He walked into the clinic like he still owned the place, even though he hadn't seen a patient in months. His jacket was neatly pressed, and his smile was as easy and superficial as it had always been. "You're skipping lunch again?" he said, leaning against her office doorway. "I'll eat later," Dr. Porter replied. She didn't look up from her charts. "You said that yesterday," he noted. "And the day before," she said. She finally looked at him, her eyes tired. "What do you need, Thomas?" He hesitated, just long enough for her to notice the shift in his posture. "We should talk tonight." Dr. Porter nodded. "About the paperwork, the separation, and everything else," he added. "Fine," she said. "Tonight." He left without another word, leaving only the scent of his expensive cologne behind. That evening, Dr. Porter drove home under a low, gray sky that threatened rain. As she pulled into her driveway, she saw Rick Halverson out in his yard again. He stood near the edge of his grass with a rake in his hands, though he rarely seemed to use it for anything other than a prop. Mostly he just moved leaves from one patch of grass to another. He wore the same faded flannel he always wore, buttoned unevenly. An old ball cap was pulled low over his thinning hair. Dr. Porter lifted a hand in greeting. "Evening, Rick." He looked up as if he hadn't noticed her car, then gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Evening, Doc. Saw your car gone early. Busy day?" "Most are," she said. Rick had been retired for years, having once worked maintenance at the local school and a variety of other places. His late wife, Diane, had been the one people remembered. She had been one of the finest nurses the county had ever known, kind without ever softening the truth. People still said that if Diane was there, you knew you were going to be all right. Diane and Dr. Porter had worked together in the early years of the clinic, but they were both too stubborn to share the same small office. They had remained close, though. Coffee, phone calls, and long laughter in kitchens. Then cancer came and took Diane away a little at a time. Rick had never really found his footing after that. "You get your mail?" he asked suddenly. "Sometimes the carrier skips houses. Happened once in '09. "I did, Rick. Thank you." He nodded, satisfied. Some days Rick would talk for 20 minutes about nothing at all, but today he just studied her face. "You look tired," he said. It wasn't an insult, just an observation from a lonely man trying to read the world. "Comes with the job," she said.
"Diane used to come home tired," he said softly. Dr. Porter's expression softened. "She worked harder than anyone I knew." She did. Rick's eyes drifted toward the dark house behind him. The town hasn't been the same since. "No," Dr. Porter agreed. "It hasn't." They stood there in the fading light. Dr. Porter stepped closer and touched his arm. "You doing all right this week, Rick?" He hesitated. "Some days better than others." "You still coming by Thursday? I'll make dinner." He blinked, a look of surprise crossing his face. "You don't have to do that." "I know," she said. He swallowed and nodded. "I'll bring a pie. From the grocery. It won't be as good as Diane's." "It will be perfect," she promised. A small, familiar silence followed. Then Rick's gaze shifted back toward her driveway. "You tell that boy of yours I still pray for him. Every night. God hears me." "I will," she said. He gave a crooked nod and went back to his leaves. Dr. Porter watched him for a moment longer before heading inside. She had learned not to rush. She just made sure he was never left alone for too long. From across the yard, Rick paused and stared after her with a thoughtful expression. Something passed behind his eyes, and then he went back to raking. Dr. Porter's house was neat, maintained, and far too empty. She stepped into Claire's old room and envisioned her future grandchild staying up late with a flashlight, reading past bedtime like her mother often did. She smiled at the thought and called her daughter while she started dinner. They talked about nothing important, mostly just the weather and how things were going in Colorado. When they hung up, Dr. Porter stayed at the counter, staring at nothing. She called Aaron, but there was no answer.
He rarely answered these days. She ate dinner alone and barely touched it. Later, she cleaned the kitchen on autopilot. She reached under the sink for the cleaning spray and wiped down the counters. She started a list for tomorrow. Groceries. Review a chart. Call Aaron again. She didn't finish it. The news hit Zion Falls the next morning. At first, people waited for it to be wrong. But Dr. Evelyn Porter was gone, and the town didn't know what to do with that. What the town could not see yet was how deeply her death would twist everything that came after. If you liked Chapter 1 and would like to read the rest of A Death in Zion Falls by Christopher L. Cooper, you can visit his website at authorchriscooper.com, or you can find his books on Amazon